Good morning and happy 2015, y'all. This is Dynasty Playbook, Dynasty FF's dedicated podcast. I am your host, Drew, and with me as always is Dave. Dave, it's the new year, new off season. How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
How was your Christmas?
It was okay. Uneventful. Work.
Well, feels like we've been away for a little longer. This is Dynasty Playbook, Dynasty FF's dedicated podcast. I can hear myself. Turn off the YouTube video. With me as always is Dave.
Give me a second. That's my computer, sorry.
I know it is.
Okay, sorry about that technical glitch there.
That was some delayed feedback there. That was terrible.
Oh, now we know how long the delay is on YouTube.
Fair enough. It feels like we were away for longer than 2 weeks, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
I feel like I've been holding in all sorts of Dynasty talk and been making my wife listen to it. She actually sat with me at breakfast the other day and learned how playoff seeding worked. She's a trooper, I tell you. I'd like to start the show off on a more somber note. This morning, news came out that Stuart Scott passed away. Lost the battle of cancer. So, he will be missed. He was Sports Center for me growing up, so. Let's go ahead and move on to a happier note then.
Yes. Black Monday?
Well, let's go ahead and start off with a little bit of the subreddit news. We had a crazy 2015 start. We had 75 new subscribers on the 2nd. I don't know if somebody's out there plugging the sub on wherever, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Definitely welcome new subscribers, new content, and moving forward, we need more discussion as well. So that always helps when we have more subscribers as well. So thank you for subscribing, and thank you for whoever plugged that and got those extra 75 that one day.
Absolutely. We also had a lot more discussion going on in the questions threads for the podcast this week. I know typically we don't discuss the questions before the show, but I think it was kind of a neat thing to do this week, and it kind of let us, flesh out the questions a little bit more before we dove into them for this week. So, I think it's something we can do in the future for certain questions, certain stuff that are more in depth. Also, for those of y'all joining us for the first time, like I said, I'm Drew. You can find me on Reddit at EAF_Marine and on Twitter at DrewDodsonNFL. And you can find Dave on Reddit at mtux96 and on Twitter at DynastyDaveII. And let's go ahead and get the show on its regular schedule with our weekend review, which is kind of 2 weeks in the review. And the big news, I mean, there's not really a whole lot of player news to go over. The big news is Black Monday. A lot of head coaches getting fired. And then Doug Marrone leaving. He didn't really get fired.
Oh, well, you also have Jim Harbaugh. He left too, but who knows if he was going to get fired or not.
Yeah, he got quote unquote fired. I mean, if he didn't leave, he was getting fired. So I mean, what do you see any major effects on dynasty values from any of these firings?
I think the 49ers is going to be an interesting one. It's just a matter of who they get to the coach. There's a lot of prospects on that team that it's really uncertain now. I mean, you have Carlos Hyde. I mean, how is he going to be utilized with the new coach? Is he going to be utilized? Gore, I'm guessing, is going to retire soon, but It's a matter of just, okay, what kind of coaching philosophy comes in? Is it going to be like more passing, like traditional 49ers power rush or not? That's going to be the deciding factor in how the coaches plays hide now.
True. Yeah, I think a lot of this is we're gonna be having to wait and see, who the new coach is taking over will be. I think there was one other thing that happened that not really a coaching change that I need to touch on for a second, and that is Kyle Orton retired, and I hate him for it, which is kind of weird sounding considering he's a waiver wire QB, except for in my 2 QB league where he was my QB2 all year because I drafted Sam Bradford as my QB2 and Matt Castle as my QB3, and we all know how that went.
Yes, we do.
And I just waiver wired my QBs that whole season. Still ended up winning the championship from having great other positions, but I had Kaepernick and Orton holding down my QB position, and then Orton retired, so I hate him, and he's stupid. I think Drew Stanton is now my QB2.
Good luck with that.
So the future looks bright.
So, do you think Marone will actually go with the Jets, and how would that affect the Jets? That's the main rumor out there that he's just going to go to the Jets.
I know he's interviewing with him. He's going to I think it's Atlanta tomorrow. So that's a possibility too. I think if he goes to the Jets, not a lot changes. It's still just a dumpster fire offense. It's an offense I don't want a part of. The only reason the Bills' offense was anything to look at this year was Sammy Watkins. And Sammy Watkins is good enough to where even if you have terrible offensive planning, he's gonna.
And with the Bills this year, it's mainly been defense as well. I mean, defense has been holding them up.
Absolutely, Jim Shorts has coached that defense just all pro level. It's ridiculous. He's killed it over there. As a Saints fan, I would love it if Marone went to the Falcons. But as a Julio owner, I would hate it. Granted, Julio is also in that same vein as Watkins, where he could probably outplay a terrible situation. But that offense was sputtering as it was. He hasn't coached defensive lines well. If he brings a defensive line coach from Buffalo, who was, one of his good old boys, the Falcons already had a poor offensive line. It's not going to get better. If Matt Ryan didn't have any time to throw, then Julio's not going to have any time to get the ball. Josh McDaniels, another hot name that's really getting out there. He's interviewed with the 49ers, which we've already talked about, and he's interviewed. Yeah, I don't know if he's interviewed with the Falcons yet, but it's coming. Hopefully he hasn't improved too much from his time with the Broncos, and he goes to the Falcons. I'd like that. That would be nice.
Well, maybe the Falcons won't give him player personnel decisions. I mean, there's a lot of coaches out there that just fail because they also want to hand it to the player as well, and they fail miserably. I mean, Rich Davis was a pretty good coach, but his downfall was recruiting.
That's true. Yeah, because the players he did hit on were kind of borderline hard. You couldn't really miss on them. Kind of like when Millen hit on Calvin. People were like, "Oh, well, he did something right." I'm like, I don't remember how old I was. I was in high school. And I'm like, I could have done that. I didn't even know how to scout back then, and I could have told you to pick Calvin.
But speaking of coaches with player personnel decisions, the biggest news out of Philadelphia is that Chip Kelly's going to have a word on his players now, for better or
I
for
don't know.
worse.
I don't know how I feel about that. Because if he decides that he's in charge and he wants to go get Mariota, then that kills all my Nick Foles shares, and that makes me a sad panda.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's going to be a matter of wait and see. Depends on does that extra power help him or hurt him. Really depends on how well he does get off from the college ranks. And I mean, a lot of coaches come up, college players, they're good at college, good in college, but once they hit the NFL, it becomes a different game. It's just a matter of he actually hit like he did in college and when he was in Oregon.
right. I think Chip's already clearly shown that in terms of just understanding of the game, he's already in that top tier. He's going to be around the game for a long time. It just depends on how his evaluations of players is going to go, and I think you can kind of tell by his recruiting of players in Oregon that there's some basis for him to be working in player management. So we'll see.
Moving on.
Yeah, I think we've talked enough about NFL that's not players, because I'm sure there are people that are done listening to us talk about it. It's going to be
Although coaching is a very important part with players as well, because that also determines on how well some players do, and how they're utilized. Like I mean, I'd be a little skittish now, a little bit. I'd still pick up Hyde, but I mean, just the coaching situation in San Francisco right now, it's up in the air because you don't know who's going to be the coach there.
yeah. I'm still not worried about Hyde. Nothing
Yeah.
changes for me regardless of who goes there. It's always talent over situation for me. He's gonna get something. And yeah, another thing we're talking about personnel. It's gonna get beat like a dead horse between now and when free agency starts on every news network. So let's move on. And we're not going to do any player discussions for the week because it's not really, there's not as much to do this week. We've got a lot of submitted questions, and we want to be able to give those the time they need. So we're just going to go ahead and do our one college player discussion for the week, and we'll move on to those. And our college player discussion will be on Mike Davis, who's a junior out of South Carolina. He's a running back. He's already declared. So now that we have more players declaring, we're able to kind of expand the amount of prospects we can look at. So we're not looking at, terrible low round guys. We can look at guys that are potentially going to be first round picks, maybe early second round picks in your rookie draft. So you guys have a better understanding of who's coming out. This guy's going to be 22 at the start of the 2015 season. So that's fairly young for a running back. That's how old Le'Veon Bell is right now. Dave, how much have you seen out of him?
I've watched a little bit of the Kentucky game and the Georgia game.
What do you think about him?
I actually kind of like him. I like the way he has decent speed. He has some good speed. He has some decent power as well. He's able to move the pile and get out of some tackles as well. The one thing I think that I might be skittish on was his 2014 season wasn't that great in terms of numbers. But I think he has the talent to succeed in the NFL. It's just a matter of just was it his work ethic that drove him down, or was it just the play calling? That's going to be the key there. Is he going to be like a lazy person in the NFL and just get by, or is he actually going to work on it? And I think he has some talent behind him, and I would probably look for him in one of my maybe second round picks if I needed a running back at that point.
In terms of the numbers, it was a combination of just a poor season for South Carolina altogether, and he just got beat up towards the end of the season. And he kind of had that same problem in 2013. He got beat up. Not to the point where he wasn't playing, but you could see it affected his play. Um, and the things you said were pretty much same things I saw. In terms of speed, he doesn't have great short distance speed, but you give him just a little bit of open field, and there's not a whole lot of players that are going to catch him. This guy's if he runs in the high 4.4s, I wouldn't be all that surprised. This guy's got a high top gear. I've watched him burn plenty of corners. Um, Problem is, it takes him a little bit to get to that top speed. Um, in terms of power, I think that's where he absolutely excels the most. He is a strong runner. Very few times you see him get brought down on initial contact. He's breaking at least one tackle, or he's dragging a defender for at least another 2-3 yards.
And he's also seen a good few spin moves in there too sometimes.
Absolutely. Yep. Even if he's still getting held onto, he's spinning with the dude.
He's trying to get those extra yardage. That's the one thing I notice. He tries to get that extra yardage, and he just doesn't give up. He just doesn't fall down, which was one of my concerns with Le'Veon Bell, but he proved wrong. Another thing I noticed on Mike Davis was I did notice he did wait for some blocks as well, so he has that knowledge to actually wait for some blocks to open up his holes.
Right. On your first thing, it's really just it's a point of him making that effort, and I like to see that. It's almost a character thing that I like to see. It's it's almost hard for me to put into words, but it's kind of like seeing them putting it all out on the field, which I think NFL teams are going to see that. I think it's going to result in him being taken a little bit higher than he would otherwise. And I just talked so long that I forgot the second thing you said.
Was it about the waiting for his blocks?
Waiting for his blocks, absolutely. Like I said before, he kind of got banged up towards the end of the season, and I think earlier in the season, you can see it in the Georgia game. It's a lot. He's patient, but not to the point where he's getting caught behind the line consistently. He waits for his blocks, but he doesn't dance too much. You know, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah. I didn't notice any dancing from him. He just basically waited for his block to open up, and he just hit the hole.
Right. But if you start watching his Missouri game, he gets kind of dancy to the point where it becomes a concern. The other thing that really concerns me is when he starts getting to that second level, he almost shies away from contact in the open field. Clearly, I mean, obviously you'll see he doesn't shy away from contact in between the tackles. He'll take on a guy head on, he doesn't care. But I don't know what it is, but it seems like every time he just has a defender coming at him, he starts dancing, and that to me says that he's either shying away from contact or he's overthinking it.
Probably overthinking it.
And I mean, it's not a huge concern. I think that's obviously something that can be easily coached. But these are just some of the things I saw. Another aspect of his game that I think is huge is he is an excellent pass catcher. He is a great hands catcher. I've seen him make some spectacular catches. But he is a terrible route runner. He is sloppy. Rounds off his routes, but I would rather have a great pass catcher over a sharp route runner any day.
Well, with running back, you're mainly going to be a dump off pass, anyways. I mean, you're not really required to be a wide receiver running these crisp routes. The running back's just going to be there for a safety valve, for the most part.
Well, that's the thing. South Carolina splits him out wide sometimes. So that adds an extra dimension to his game, and that's something the NFL could use him as well. I think that if they work on him with his route running, that definitely adds a lot more value to him as a fantasy asset as well. And I think improving his route running is a lot easier than improving a pass catcher. That's why Kelvin Benjamin's such a concern, because you see these players that they don't know how to catch with their hands, and it's almost it's almost a career killer. But he's an excellent hands catcher. I mean, I if I knew how to do any kind of video editing, I could put you together a highlight reel of all his hands catches. In terms of pass blocking, not very good.
That could be worse. But
yeah, there's not a lot of college running backs that are very good. He tends. There are some times where he will engage the blocker, but there are a lot more times where he seems hesitant to engage anyone. So, if he can improve on that at the next level, he's an easy 3-down back, which gives him inherent fantasy value. I can see him if he gets 65% of the touches in any NFL backfield, he's a guaranteed RB2. I'm kind of at the spot where I'm not going to spend probably any higher than 111, 112 on him. But I feel like that's about fair for where he goes, unless he gets buried somewhere behind. Let's see who's young and great. If he gets buried behind a Le'Veon Bell, then he drops. But that's about the only situation I can think of. He would have to get stuck behind someone young and versatile to where he wouldn't have much of a role besides a pure backup. And I think we can go ahead and we can move on. But from what I saw, I liked him.
Yeah. I did like what I saw from him, and I probably would put him on my list to pick up when my rookie drafts happen. If I really need a player, I think I would look at Mike Davis.
Yeah, he's not a high upside play, but he's one of those guys that you can count on for some production every week. That is, if he gets in a role where he's not stuck behind somebody. And let's go ahead and move on to our submitted questions for the week so we can give those the time they deserve. And our first question for the week was from M. Lee 2587. And his question was, or her, I don't know. I'd like to hear your top 5 buys and sells. And I guess we can swap off one for one, except for on this first one on the buys, because ours are identical.
Yes, they are.
So why don't you go ahead and tell them who it is?
Eifert, basically a tight end out of Cincinnati. He's been injured all year. I think you get him for pretty much cheap price because I think people are going to be overlooking him just because he was injured all year and he didn't put up the stats. And in a lot of people's mind, it's what have you done for me? And he hasn't done much because he hasn't been the ability to play. And he has the talent there. It's just a matter of just staying on the field, which you would say is just a freak accident and injury. With a lot of tight ends recently, I've been seeing a lot of injuries anyways to the tight end position across the board. I mean, you have Jimmy Graham getting injured, Gronk in his past injury history, but Eifert would be an excellent buy this year to look to get during the offseason.
I agree. I was a huge Eifert fan going into the offseason last year. He was, I think, my tight end 7. I invested in him heavily. I'm going to invest in him even more this offseason. I think you can get him easily for tight end 2 prices. I'd still probably give up a late first-round pick for him in this draft for him. The consensus was going into this season that he was going to be the number 2 option in that passing offense over Sanu and Marvin Jones. So that to me bodes well for his future. Jermaine Gresham is going to be a free agent this year. I honestly don't see them re-signing him. Maybe they do if he'll sign cheap, but I don't think he will. I think there's enough places that need a quality tight end that he'll go somewhere and get paid decently. They invested a first-round pick in him, and I don't think they're going to let that go to waste. So I think Eifert's a solid buy.
Eifert, very, very solid. Although I'm not a big fan of tight ends, but if you get a tight end for cheap that performs, that's where you get them. Tight ends I typically look for cheap because I don't really want to spend too much for my tight end position because I'm not a big fan of building around tight end to begin with, and Eifert would be a good choice to go after.
All right. Next guy I have on my list is Stephen Ridley. I know that dreaded New England backfield, but don't worry, his chains are coming off. He's a free agent coming into this year. He was a 1,000-yard rusher in 2012. He looked great doing it. He had 12 touchdowns that year, I think. He had a good season. He looked every bit the role of a starting running back, and I think he absolutely has the potential to go do that somewhere else. You could probably get Ridley at RB3, RB4 prices. You could easily get Ridley for probably the 205 pick right now, something like that, and I would pay that in a heartbeat. What are your thoughts on Ridley right now, Dave?
I think it's the dreaded Patriots backfield that really gets me. If he moves on, great, but where is he going to move on to? That's going to be the issue this year with a lot of free agent running backs and an excellent rookie running back class this year. A lot of free agent running backs are going to have pretty much a harder time this year to move on than previous years with all their rookies coming up. That's going to be my concern is where is he going to land?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of places he could land. I still think that given what the 205 is probably going to get you this year, I think it's worth the risk. But
if you get a 2.5 for him, depending on your league, if your league really places a good premium on running backs like mine does, you might have to pay more. But
I'd probably give up to probably about the 203 for him.
Yeah.
Man, that's probably where I'd top out because there's about 14 good players in this draft, and that also depends on landing position.
Yeah.
Because
it'll probably narrow down to 7 by when everything's said and done because a lot of them are probably going to land behind good young veterans.
I was actually gonna say that differently because the later picks might be worth a little bit more than I'm saying now because players I don't like are going to get drafted into good situations, and then they'll get drafted higher, and guys I like will fall a little bit farther. So who knows? But I think that's enough about Ridley. Who do you have next?
I'm going to have the wide receiver I've been mentioning earlier in earlier podcasts, Mr. Stedman Bailey. Started slow this year, coming off of suspension, but I think he has the talent to succeed with the Rams offense, depending if they get a QB behind him. But I think looking for guys for cheap that are good buys, I think right now Stedman Bailey is a good one to have on your roster. You get him for pretty relatively cheap, and he's still, of course, a prospect. You don't really know how he's going to perform, but right now you can pick him up for very cheap. And if you didn't pick him up on the waiver wire late in the season, you still get him cheap right now because people still don't know what he really has to offer. And I do think he has the talent to succeed.
I agree. He didn't finish the season off on any sort of great high note. So owners of him aren't going into the offseason with a bunch of confidence for him. I think that's kind of a nice thing for buy low. I agree. He showed some good flashes this year, and for a cheap buy, that's kind of all I need. If he's shown enough to be productive, and the only thing he's missing is consistency, give him time. I'd rather have him on my team already then him start to be consistent, and then I have to go try and buy him for 3 times the cost. Yeah, Stephen Bailey. Even if Bradford comes back, that's a QB improvement. So I feel like that's another easy check in the box. My next guy is another tight end because, unlike you, I actually like the tight end position.
You like the tight end, unlike me.
Right. I like Larry Donnell, who started off the season hot and then kind of fizzled out a little bit at the end of the season. He's not a guy I'm willing to go out and spend a ton to get, but if you can get him relatively cheap, I'd be willing to do that because he's not going to have a lot of competition at the tight end position. There's not a lot of real good free agent tight ends this year. There's even less good tight ends in the draft this year outside of Max Williams and possibly Funchess. So that tells me Donnell's at least got another year to try and prove himself. So.
Donnell's the main reason why I don't like the tight end position and building around it. I was able to actually grab Donnell in preseason. Basically, lately you could just pull these tight ends off the waiver wire and head gold. I wouldn't. This is one reason why I don't like spending a lot on tight ends because you could find them. I mean, to get like a good 5-10 points off of them. If you don't have Graham, you don't have Gronk. That's pretty much what you're doing anyways. But Donnell, if you get him relatively cheap, is a good buy. I liked what I saw from him this year. I started out the year with Jordan Cameron, and I also had Jordan Reed, 2 wonderfully injured tight ends. Actually traded Cameron away for 2 firsts, one this year, one next year. So I got a good value from Jordan Cameron, so I just sold him off. Also helps when you have a few Browns fans in your league too. So, but I was smart enough to dump Cameron and actually get some value for him when I could. But I would look at getting Donnell for cheap as well.
You lucky jerk. I'm telling you. I tried selling Jordan Cameron last year after his hot season for 2 firsts, and it was like pulling teeth. I wish I was in the league with more Browns fans.
Ironically, it's the way it turned out. This is actually just an online league and pretty much off of message boards, and it just so happened that we have like 4 Browns fans together, and it wasn't even on Browns message boards either. It's just the way it turned out to be. So.
That's how the subreddit's money league is. I think we've got 4 Texans fans in there, just randomly.
Yeah.
But I'll let you go ahead and go on to your next guy.
My next guy, going on the injured route again. I think you could probably get Allen Robinson for a pretty decent price now. Once again, it's what have you done for me lately? I did like a lot what I seen in the beginning of the season when he was actually playing. He's a rookie actually I drafted, but if you get him for relatively cheap, considering he's been injured for the good portion of the year, and people don't really hold on to this player as much as a person who's actually done something for them in the late of the year. I actually like Allen Robinson a lot in that Jacksonville offense. If it improves better.
I'm still a huge fan of Robinson. I don't care that he's injured. He looked like he was coming on strong before he got injured. I don't know how cheap you're really going to be able to buy him. I think you are going to get somewhat of a discount because he was injured, but I think you are still going to have to spend a decent amount of capital to get him. He's going to at least cost you a first round plus probably a little bit more, but I think in the end it's going to be worth it. I think he's going to pay off in the end for what you pay for him.
Value-wise, now's the time to buy him pretty much, and that's why I have him on the buy list.
Yeah. In this draft, I'd easily give up the 106 for him in a heartbeat. 105, give up that too. Probably the 104 too. There's probably 3, maybe 4 players in this class I like better than Allen Robinson. Uh, I'm a big Allen Robinson fan, not gonna lie. Um, and your buy list was actually only 3 long.
Yes, it was only 3 long.
That's cool. We'll go ahead and buzz through my last 2 because my last 2 were a little bit lower guys. My next guy is Derek Carr, QB for the Raiders. I've talked about him a couple times already. Kind of been a fan of his lately. He is right now in Ryan McDowell's mock drafts. He is being drafted as the QB 17, so QB 2.5, going at 146 overall. If they draft Amari Cooper, or they draft better offensive line, or they get any sort of run game, if they can improve that offense at all, he could easily be putting up low-end QB1 numbers. The only thing is...
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. What you got?
Hey, one thing I do like about the Oakland Raiders coming into the season is they have a lot of cap space, and I think they will be making a good play this year to actually improve their team. And Derek Carr, I think, is right on that buy list as well. So that's one thing you're gonna be looking at the Oakland Raiders, is that if they make a good play, which I think they will, considering how much cap space they have, this is the year that a lot of their dead space gets freed up, and they're probably gonna be the one team with the top cap space this year.
Yep.
And have a lot of I think they're gonna make a lot of noise this year.
Yep. Derek Carr, I mean, this is a guy that was producing pretty solidly with guys that would probably not be a QB or a wide receiver 3 on most other teams. The touchdown production was, obviously limited, but most of that offense's touchdown production was limited in general. Running, I mean, when your offense is one-dimensional, it's very easy to shut down. But he still managed to put up some of the best yardage for a rookie QB ever. So that to me is very encouraging. I think Derek Carr has a very bright future, and I think if you want to get on that train, do it now. I think just like Ryan Tannehill last year, I think he was a good cheap buy before his value started going up. I think Derek Carr is the guy to get it this year. And my last guy is one of my binkies from last year. Is Aaron Dobson, Patriots wide receiver. I was huge on this guy last year after he had a great second half to his rookie season. I think a lot of people are off the bandwagon on him after he did, all of nothing this year. I think that was more of a product of him being injured and him playing for Bill Belichick, and he doesn't tell us anything. Granted, that could not be true at all, but we have no idea. For as cheap as I could get him right now, though, I'm willing to take that chance because he looked really good the second half of his rookie season. He looked like easily could be a dynasty wide receiver too. I think that he's a great.
I definitely like this prospects you can get for cheap and that has the talent to succeed, which is the main reason why I have Stedman Bailey on my list. Is you have these young prospects. They haven't really shown much yet, but you get them cheap now and hope that they turn into something.
Yep. And that's actually going to finish off our buy list. I think that's it. There were a couple of guys that I was thinking about putting on there that were a little bit more expensive, that I think their value is going to see an uptick this season, but I decided to go with, those cheaper guys that you're going to be able to get for a lot lower, that could see a much bigger increase in value, that you could see a lot more return on investment within the next year.
And a lot of times with fantasy, that's what wins you games, is you find those young prospects for cheap and you turn them into something. But out of curiosity, if you want to mention a few other of those names that you get more expensive that you mentioned, if you just want to mention them, that'd be great too. Thanks.
Cooks. I think his value right now, his cost would be similar to Allen Robinson's. Yeah. I think it would be close to there. I think they're both
Buy him now while you can.
cost wise, they're gonna see they're probably gonna cost about the same, and they're gonna see a similar increase in value. Um, I might also be overestimating how much Allen Robinson might cost right now. Another cheap buy right now before free agency starts is Devontae Adams and Dante Moncrief. Before I think Reggie Wayne's going to retire. I think that's going to clear the way for Dante Moncrief, and I think Randall Cobb's going to leave. I think it's going to clear the way for Devontae Adams, and that's going to clear up any confusion, and it's going to their value is going to skyrocket. Another couple of cheap ones are Isaiah Crowell and Christine Michael. I think Crowell is going to have a firmer hold on the job next year, and Christine Michael.
Depending on where Lynch goes and what he does.
Right. I mean, I think I've talked about Christine Michael like 3 different shows out of our 9, so I feel like I don't need to go into him anymore.
These are just quick mentions. That's all.
Right. I think he's got a great amount of talent, and I think if he starts, he's going to be an RB1. That's why I think he's worth investing in.
Okay, do you want to move on to our sell list now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get going on that. And we actually had a couple in common on here, so this should go a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
So why don't you go ahead and start us off?
First one that we did agree on was DeMarco Murray. He was one of the top running backs this year. My league, he's number 2 behind Le'Veon Bell. I think a lot of it is sell now while you can. Of course, he could still break out next year and have an awesome season, but that's also going to depend on, okay, where is he going to be? Is he going to stay with Dallas with their cap issues, and is he going to sign with them or not? Which there's a lot of doubts that he's going to stay in Dallas.
Yeah, even if it's announced today that he's signing a long-term contract with Dallas and whatever, I don't care. He's still a sell right now for me. I get it. He's still fairly young in terms of dynasty running backs, but even if Dallas loses their playoff game today, DeMarco Murray is going to finish this season with over 500 carries. That's unheard of for a running back. Typically, getting anywhere close to 400 carries is extremely detrimental to a running back's career. You look at Arian Foster after he had that many carries between the regular season and playoffs. You look at Ray Rice when he did it. Their next year was just it was essentially a bust season, and a lot of players, their career goes downhill from there. Not even just their next season.
Let's just say let's say that maybe he bucks that trend and actually succeeds next year. But the thing is you can get a lot of value out of DeMarco Murray, trade him for some other players that are going to help your team as well. You're going to get a good trade in Murray. You can get a lot of value back in return, which hopefully turns out better than what his season will be next year. And chances are is his season next year is not going to be as good as this year. But even if that's the case, you still get good value out of that trade.
Right. Even the guys I know that are fairly high on DeMarco Murray still only have them as like their dynasty running back, like 3 or 4, which to me, that means that's his high point. That means even if he repeats next year and has another good season, his value is not gonna go up. That means he's at his peak value right now. So sell. Get as much value while you can. Sometimes you got to look at this more as a stock market than anything else.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and move right on to the other guy we agree on, and that's C.J. Anderson. And C.J. Anderson is a player that, I picked up all over the place. Drafted him in a bunch of startups, had him from a couple rookie drafts. because I like it. I like him for what he is. He's a good, strong runner, and he's functional. But Peyton Manning's not going to be there forever. He's not going to be fueling running back production forever. That running back situation there is uncertain. They could bring in another running back. They could bring in, they could make a push to get a Terrell Davis. Obviously, that's being a little facetious, but if they don't get the Super Bowl this year, that's what they felt like they needed that stud running back to get it for Elway. What if Elway decides they need it for Manning? I think that right now is your point to sell high. I think if you can get a high second round pick for him, I'm selling. And that's actually kind of hard to get right now, honestly, because I've been trying. Right now I'm actually
some of these players at a high note, and I think C.J. Anderson's one of those you want to sell now before his value decreases. Sell him at the high point when you can.
Yeah.
Especially in a certain backfield like Denver.
I think, honestly, I still think his talent is the best in that backfield, but I'm worried that when Hillman gets healthy again, it's the carries are going to be split enough to where he's not going to be the fantasy dynamo he was in the second part of the season, which is going to kill his value.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and move on to the next guy you have on your list.
Next guy I have on my list is actually LaShawn McCoy, Shady, of course. I think it's going to be a limited sell, depending if you could actually find value there. I know a lot of people still like him. He's still young. He's still relatively young. But I think he's getting to a point where I'm probably going to start trying to sell him during this offseason, see what I can get for him. I know he had an offseason this year, which kind of does hurt his value. But a lot of that could be placed on the offensive line in Philadelphia this year. And if you get a good deal, take it. I would take it this year, just because he's getting up to he's kind of reaching that point where his age is going to become a factor. And I think he's just one of those you sell now while you can, or you either sell him now or you can just ride him into the sunset. That's how I view McCoy right now at this point.
I'm somewhat similar to you. I agree if you can sell him now for fair value. I'm completely agree with you. If you can get if you can get about running back 3 value, not like if you can get like the number 3 dynasty running back value for him or running back 4 value for him, I'd do that. But I don't necessarily agree that if you can't sell him this offseason that you need to ride him all the way, because I think if he comes back and looks like old McCoy at the beginning of this next season, I think that that's a second window to sell him, and he might actually see a little bit of an increased value if he looks like his old self and gets Chip gets him back in that passing game.
I think McCoy is in that window though. I mean, either sell him now or wait until if he has a second win next season, that's when you sell him as well. It's just that this is the year to look at it, either now or in the 2015 season. Hope that he actually has a great season coming into the season. If he falters off in next season, though, I don't see you're gonna get much more value out of him though. So it's either now, next season, or run him into the sunset in my view right now.
Right. If you don't sell him now, then you're taking a huge gamble if you think you're gonna sell him later.
I think he might actually have a good season, but it's going to be a wait and see. If he has a great season, you're going to be able to sell him more during the season. But if it's either now during next season or you're riding him into the sunset.
Yeah, because if he doesn't look good next season, you're not selling him for anything. Nobody's going to give you anything for him.
And if you wait until after that season, then you're probably in the mode to just run him into the sunset.
Yeah, he's nothing.
That point in his career where it's getting to that one. one aspect. Okay, you're selling your aging veterans. You either sell them before they peak or after peak, or you just hold on to them. And I think
Yeah,
McCoy is going to be at that juncture at this coming season.
yeah. I think McCoy is where Forte was about 2 years ago, except Forte didn't have a bad season. Forte kept producing, so Forte kept his value up. But in terms of where they're at in their career arc, my next guy was kind of the equivalent of McCoy for the wide receivers, and that's Calvin Johnson. I think Calvin Johnson is a guy you need to be looking at selling right now. This guy, he's going to be 30 this next coming season. He's clearly, age is starting to affect him, whether it's increased recovery time from injuries or just the cliff is coming. Even for Megatron, the cliff is coming. I think you need to be selling him for all the value you can get for him, because that value is going to start decreasing. Now, I know there are some people that are going to tell me that's blasphemy, and that's not okay. I know if you listen to the DLF podcast, Carl Safchek still preaches Calvin Johnson like he's a number 2, number 3 dynasty wide receiver. I don't see it. Personally, he's not even a first round startup pick for me anymore.
I think with Calvin, I think he hit the nail. I'd probably say even you should have sold him last year and diversify your value in him, because he was just getting that point where he's going to fall off the cliff and he's going to head there. Look at Andre Johnson. He's there right now. I mean, just look at Andre Johnson right there. I mean, a lot of people are either holding on to him, hoping that he has a good season, but he's aging as well, and a lot of people have him on their roster. And you're not going to get as much value out of Andre Johnson now as you would a couple years ago.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and move on from Calvin. Hit your next guy.
My next guy is goes along with the diversifying the value kind of thing. If you have one of those top QBs, I'm talking about the Rodgers and Manning, so definitely Manning. But if you trade him for say like another QB that's going to be decent for you and like maybe some like picks, I think you should probably diversify your value at that position. Just as it goes during the fantasy has been going, you could pick up these QBs later in the draft. That's pretty much what you're looking at. If you could trade your top QB for another QB that's going to perform for you and another player on the side to actually help your team, I think you should probably look into doing that if you can. Now, I wouldn't sell them for junk, of course, and that's not going to help your team at all, but I think these top QBs are a good spot to diversify your value and get good value for them.
Yeah, I could see that, especially selling off somebody like Peyton or Breeze, somebody that's older, kind of approaching that age cliff. But the problem for me with selling somebody like Rodgers or Luck is, I think there's enough people that are wary of overspending on QBs, and I really don't think you're going to end up getting what they're worth. And that to me would be a concern, to the point where I would almost just rather hold on to them.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't get the deal, then yeah, you definitely take it. But like that's going to be like in any trade. If you can't get that value that you want, don't take it. Luck, I think, would be one of the exception. If you have Luck, I'd probably hold on to him, just because the system that he's in and the youth there. I think you do hold on to Luck. Rodgers, I probably would look to diversify his value though.
Yeah, I mean,
if you can.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you can really get what he's worth, then I'm all for it. I just don't know if you can. If you can,
I think there's enough people out there that look at a top QB and thinking that's going to win them the championship out there. I think there's enough of those people out there that will give you actually more than what they're worth, and actually give you the chance to diversify your top QB.
Well, if that's the case, then take advantage of those guys. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next guy, and that's Emmanuel Sanders, who he's not getting old at all. I don't think he's going to have a worse season next season unless Peyton Manning continues to just start losing limbs and falling apart on the field.
Yeah,
But
right.
I think his value is kind of attached to Peyton Manning's right now, and I think you need to sell him before Peyton Manning starts talking retirement. You might be selling him a little bit before his peak value, but if murmurs start coming out about 2016 or 2015 being Peyton's last season during the offseason,
Or even this
then
year.
right, if that starts coming out, then people are going to be a lot more hesitant to buy him. If you can sell him now, right after he had just the great season that he did, I think it's going to be your safest point to sell for a ton of value.
Yeah.
And that's all I got on that. Dave, you have anything to add to that?
Nope. I think with Emmanuel Sanders, you do sell now while you can before Peyton Manning does decide to retire. I think a lot of Sanders' value is going to be tied to Manning, and is Manning going to be there too much longer? That's going to be the key there. Moving on though to my last sell person will be one player that I think a lot of people might disagree with is Kelvin Benjamin. I think we touched on him previous podcasts. I just don't see it. I think he is just basically numbers dependent. He's basically the only wide receiver in Carolina right now, and I think once you get other wide receivers on the other side of him, I think he's going to have his downfall. It's the matter of how his hands are. Coming into the draft, the stone hands were the issue, and I still think that that's going to be the issue for Calvin Benjamin. And I think right now is the time to sell him because you get more value now before he actually falls off the cliff per se. I could definitely be wrong on this, and I know a lot of people will probably disagree with that, but I think Calvin Benjamin is at that point where you want to sell him now while you can.
Well, I'm not going to be the one to disagree with you because you and I are pretty much in sync on saying that his hands are a huge issue. You could see it last night in his game. Drops are a huge problem. He's also, I saw a breakdown last night on where his route usage is. They use him a lot on 9 routes. Those are low percentage targets, and I think that's not a real good indication for future production, in my opinion.
And I do think Carolina is not going to stick with him as their sole wide receiver. I think coming into this draft, I think they're going to pick up another wide receiver to play, and I think that wide receiver is probably going to outplay Calvin Benjamin down the road.
Yeah, even if he doesn't outplay him, he's going to steal enough targets to where Kelvin Benjamin's not going to be able to put up enough production to be worth what he's worth now. And my last guy is going to be Andre Ellington, and it might be too late to sell on him, honestly. But it's going to be the highest point going forward. Arizona, it's already been said by the Arizona front office that they want to bring in another running back to spell him next year. This is a guy who doesn't have the body type to be a lead rusher in the NFL. He's going to get beat up. He's going to get broken down. I think he's got the ability to be a 3-down back and have some PPR production, but nowhere near what his value was going into this offseason. If you can get anything of real value for Andre Ellington, I would be selling him ASAP.
I pretty much agree with Ellington. I think they will fell off the train there. You probably can't get as much now as you could at the beginning of the season when the train was in full motion. Um, but if you could get him for a decent value, sell him. But I have a hard time seeing that, especially at as many injuries as he dealt this year with.
Yeah. And I think that kind of finishes off Emily's question, which took up a half the show. That took up way longer than I thought it would.
Yeah, that was a big question. That's why I kind of limited mine to 3 because I had a feeling that was going to run long.
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to talk that much, but I guess I should have expected that I was going to talk that much.
Yes, that's true.
I normally do. So let's go ahead and move on to Quick on the Draws question. Who, if you don't know this, he submits the streaming defense rankings on fantasy football every week. Which, if y'all didn't know, they're awesome. Seriously, I've used them for, I don't know, at least probably 2 or 3 years, as long as he's been putting them out, and they're an excellent tool. They just rock. He's in the subreddit Money League. He's just a good dude. And his question for us this week is, curious, how you'd handle a team that has a single stud, let's say Dez, and a whole lot of garbage, just turds everywhere. Would you rebuild around him, or scrap the whole thing and rebuild from parts? And Dave, I'm going to let you take the con on this one and start us off.
Ah, boy. Tough dilemma right there. I'd be tempted to actually say sell Dez for maybe a semi-stud or a stud prospect and maybe some picks and hope that you could turn those picks into studs. It's kind of hard to build from the garbage that you have around your stud. But on the other side of the game, you have the stud that you want to wait and actually draft studs around him. Because by the time you draft those studs and they turn into something, you're probably going to end up with an old stud that's aging better and thinking retirement. I would probably say if you get a prospect stud that's maybe a little bit younger and some picks, I'd probably do it that way. But if you're already dealing with a young stud to begin with, I would keep the young stud depending on how old he really is. But I would look at maybe actually do the diversification of them, but definitely go with the younger players and go from there. You definitely don't want to go older than that. You don't want to stay at the same age. You want to go with those younger guys that are actually going to be on your team when you're ready to actually have a contender team. So I would say scrap the whole thing. Definitely go younger, but make sure you're getting those young studs that are actually going to perform. Don't trade them for like all prospects, but promising prospects.
Yeah. My answer to this is pretty standard. That's not that it's standard, but it's going to be the same every time. If you have a team that it's Dez and a whole bunch of waiver wire fodder, that says you're probably 2 to 3 years minimum away from being a contending team. That means Dez is going to be 28 to 29. That means you can't rebuild him around him. That means bare minimum, the first year you're competing is going to be the last year before you would be looking to sell him before his value starts to drop. So I would be looking to sell him now when his value is at its peak. And if I'm looking to sell him, I'm looking to sell him for young prospects, like you said. But not only young prospects, but I'm looking at any players that I think have a good opportunity to increase in value within the next 6 to 12 months. Players that I could potentially flip to regain value on and continue to improve my team. Because I don't necessarily have to just trade him for players that I'm going to keep. If I could trade him for, 4 guys that are going to be worth twice as much in 6 months, then I can trade all 4 of those guys and then have 8 players that are worth what those 4 guys were, 6 months ago. That's how I look at a rebuild. It's not necessarily I need to have these 4 players. It's I need to be able to I need to have these pieces, and these pieces need to appreciate in value so that I can continue to build value forward. I'm not going to trade Dez for pieces that aren't going to gain more value in the future, because otherwise I'm just throwing away a stud player. That to me doesn't make any sense. Because even if these players don't turn into studs, that's okay. If all of them increase in value, and I can trade 3 of them away for a stud, and then I have a stud and one of the guys left over, then I just won. I just won that trade.
Definitely excellent points there. Yeah, definitely excellent points right there. You don't really have to hold on to those players that you trade Dez for. I think a lot of it is you don't trade your stud Dez for like a person that's about the same age, because you're going to be in the same boat. Unless you think that player is actually going to be worth more than Dez in the future, but that's going to be highly unlikely. You do want to get those players that will gain value. In that case, that's what you're looking for anyways, whether they're going to be on your team or not in the future. So definitely look into trading your studs when you can, if you can, for the values and pieces that you can get for them. Definitely don't trade them for like just purely draft picks. You want to get those players that you could actually trade or have value on your team.
I don't know. If I'm a rebuilding team and I can get 4 firsts, at least, and they're not all late round firsts, I'd do that. Because close to draft time, those firsts end up picking up a lot of value, and I can flip those firsts for some decent stuff.
Yeah.
Because, firsts are blanket capital. Everybody likes first-round picks. I don't have to sit here and try and sell people on certain players, because I know people will throw players at me that, have some hype in the Dynasty world. I'm like, well, I don't like them. They're like, well, why not? I'm like, I just don't like them.
I don't believe the hype.
Yeah, well, that was my problem. People last year tried to get me on Antonio Brown, and I'm like, I think he's a volume-based receiver. Turns out I was, I guess, wrong, but that was. But you could sell me on first-round picks. I'm always looking for first-round picks, but I wasn't buying Antonio Brown. But let's go ahead and move on to our next question, and that's from Quadro Who. I would like to hear your thoughts on the best way to prevent tanking in a full Dynasty league. I operate under the assumption that people in my league have integrity and don't tank. That's not true. But I'm still looking for the best system. I'm the commissioner and don't want to have to make judgment calls on what qualifies as tanking. Right now, we discourage it by awarding a bonus pick to the teams that finish 5th, 7th, and 9th. Now, let me explain that to y'all real quick. That is for the teams that do not make the playoffs. Those are essentially consolation bracket. The winners of consolation bracket matches get like a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 4th round pick. Like the 5th. Whoever finishes 5th gets a 2nd round pick. Whoever finishes 7th gets a 3rd, and 9th gets a 4th. Something like that. I don't remember. He explained it to me, though. Also, draft order is reversed to the postseason results, so at least if someone wanted to tank, there would be no incentive to do so, until the postseason losers bracket, and it wouldn't impact who wins the championship/regular season matchups. Any alternative better suggestions? All right, Dave, I'm going to let you start this off because I'm already out of breath.
I think the issue with tanking is you're gonna have to make those tough decisions as the league manager. I think trying to fix it with these other fixes, I think, is actually worse than just making that judgment call. Because in the end, you could really tell if a person is really trying to tank, that they're not just making judgment calls on players involved. I think in the end, if they do tank and you didn't catch it, so be it. Um, I think a lot of these extra fixes out there, I really don't like them personally. I think it is what it is, and if you're at a point where you just give up on the season, your team probably needs this high fix anyways. That's the way I see it. I mean, because if you're in that position to actually tank, your team probably needs help anyways. I mean, obviously you didn't start the league with a good spot, and you're already early enough in the season to tank for a point that you need those extra picks because you're already there. And I mean, it depends on how competitive your league is to begin with. But I think most teams are actually in the hunt for the playoffs, even late in the season, to where the tanking is not really a big issue to begin with. That's the way I view it. Because if you're in a position to tank, you're already giving up because your team sucks, and you're going to need those players anyways.
Yeah, I think that's not quite what he's asking, I guess. It's more like the way I was looking is how do they keep guys from tanking altogether? Like, I know that we talked about using possible points as a way to prevent tanking, and I know you don't like that. You think that's doo-doo. And we had discussed using possible points on the forum already, or on the subreddit, so we won't go too far into that. My big issue is if you want to discuss, if you want to prevent tanking without using possible points, or without looking at it that way, without it being a judgment call, the only way I can really see it is if you look at like an all play record. Whereas if you essentially look at their record, if they played every team every week, I mean, is there any other way you can think to really look at it fairly?
I think in the end you just have to look at it as a judgment call. I mean, it can be pretty obvious when those people really want to tank, but like I said, I mean, if you're in a position to tank where you're just giving up on the season, you probably need those picks anyways. Because basically, I mean, you're in that position because your team's not that great and you didn't start out great and you're not making the playoffs, and that's the only reason why you're gonna have a reason to tank is you're not gonna make the playoffs. And I think once you get into the playoffs anyways, that's a whole different game and anything could happen. And a lot of people should realize that and not tank when you still have a playoff chance. And if you're tanking when you still have a playoff chance, what's the purpose? I could get a high first round pick. What is that?
Yeah.
That's nothing. But I really don't see any reason why you should make these instruments to prevent tanking when these teams that are in a position to tank in the first place probably need it anyways. I mean, look at records. I mean, you have like what? If you have like 6 out of 12 teams in the playoffs, even the 7th and 8th and maybe even the 9th seed are still in position to fight for that 6th seed. So basically what you're dealing with, teams that could tank are the 10th, 11th, and 12th, your bottom end of the league anyways. And those teams tank, that's pretty much up to them. I think with anything, those teams are going to need help anyway, so it's not going to make that big of a difference if they're choosing first, second, or third.
See, the thing is, I've seen teams that tank that clearly didn't deserve the number one, the one overall pick, when there were teams that clearly needed the 101 pick but missed it because the other team tanked. You know.
And why?
Just because that team is, what's that?
And why was a team that didn't deserve the number one pick, why were they that low in the standings?
Because they didn't start their best roster. See, that's the thing with tanking is these guys.
That's where you make the league commissioner decision. Say no, you don't belong in this league. I want someone that's going to be competitive, and your team could have been in the playoffs, but somehow you're choosing first in the next year's draft. That's when you have to make those tough LM those league manager decisions say, no, you don't belong in this league. And you don't need these special instruments to decide that. If you have those teams that are constantly being on the bottom of the thing when they have like all these studs on their team, why are they in your league?
Right. That's that's what I was saying. I mean, if it's got to be a judgment call, but there are clear times where teams tank that shouldn't be getting the 101. Where they have integrity issues. There's clear times where teams tank where they're not the worst team in the league. Because tanking, there's differences between tanking and just trading away your studs and rebuilding.
Yeah.
Rebuilding is perfectly okay if you trade away, your aging veterans for draft picks and you don't have anybody to start and you have a weak team. There's nothing wrong with that. That's an essential part of Dynasty. But
if you're sitting Le'Veon Bell, Calvin Johnson, all those players, and putting in players you picked off the waiver wire, I look at that probably as tanking. But
right.
In the end, I mean, if you have a team that's in position to tank, they probably didn't have that good of a season anyways, unless they are just sitting their starters the whole season, which I have no clue why anyone would do that to begin with. Now, I could see maybe having a very unlucky season, but in that case, if you're having that unlucky of a season, maybe you deserve some luck in the next year's draft, and you kind of deserve that first-round pick. That's really high.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've kind of gone round and round on this one for a minute. I think we can go ahead and move on.
Yeah, personally, I just don't see any reason to have a special instrument to actually prevent it. I think most people are going to try to prevent it in the first place by actually having a good team. And if you're only looking at the bottom portion of your league that's going to be in any position to tank in the first place, and if you have a high-ranking team that is tanking on purpose, and they probably don't deserve in your league anyways.
Yeah. All right. Our next question is from Sherlockness. I like that. That's a good name. I'd be interested in how you guys see the 49ers offense going forward, and what do you do with players like Kaepernick and Crabtree? And I'm going to start this off with saying that I don't think Crabtree is going to be a part of the 49ers offense next year. So I really don't think we need to talk about him other than the fact that he's going to go be a free agent somewhere else. Unless you think he's going to re-sign with the 49ers. Dave?
Yes.
Do you think he's going to re-sign with the 49ers?
Not really.
I don't either.
He's going to go out and try to find as much money as he can. And I think this goes back to the Black Monday conversation we had earlier in this podcast, is who's going to be coach at the 49ers. That's going to be the issue with the 49ers offense and what their philosophy is going to be. You still kind of do have to look at talent and what that talent can do in any situation. I might downgrade Hyde a little bit, but I would still hold on to him. I still like Hyde a lot. I don't think I'm too worried about his coaching situation. But if the coaching situation comes and, I'm pure running back by committee and each player is only going to have this so much, I'd be worried a little bit. But I think with the talent of Hyde, I think you shouldn't have to worry too much. I think a lot of the 49ers offense is going to come down to who is their coach going to be. And until that coach is hired, I really don't. It's kind of hard to make any guesses. Kaepernick, I don't think was a QB I was looking to get anyways, so it's going to be the one issue is, once again, coaching. Who's going to be the coach and what's his philosophy?
Yeah. And like I said, I don't care who the coach is. I still like Hyde. I still love Hyde. He's my buddy.
Talent.
Yep. And as for the rest of the 49ers offense, I don't want them. Unless Chip Kelly decides he wants to go coach the 49ers or something, there's not really a lot of situations where I see Kaepernick having some huge resurgence and just becoming a QB1 again. Vernon Davis is going to be 31. Anquan Bolden's going to be 110. Stevie Johnson's still going to run weird, kind of.
He's going to be an offensive world over there.
Yeah, I got no interest in that offense outside of Hyde. So that's where I'm at. So we'll go ahead and move on to our last question for the day, and that is from Northid 710. It says, I'm curious, how do you guys see Andre Williams' role evolving next year? Do you think he becomes the lead rusher in a timeshare, he's a workhorse, or does he fall to the side? Personally, I think he might get a little bit of work, but I was never big on Andre Williams myself. I saw him going in the second round of rookie drafts, and I thought people just got into their meth stash before they came into my rookie drafts, because that seems way too high to me. He's caught more balls in one season in the NFL than he did in his entire college career. He does nothing for me. I think that if they don't get a new running back, then it's still Rashad Jennings' backfield next year. So, Andre Williams, to me, if you can sell him for a second-round pick this year, I'm doing it in a heartbeat. If I can get any second-round pick, I'm doing it, and I'm not even thinking twice. I'll even do a little dance in front of my computer. It'll be great. What do you think, Dave?
He hasn't been on my radar all year. Maybe a little bit during the murmurs in the preseason, but since then I haven't been paying attention to him, so I have nothing really much to say other than that.
Gotcha.
If that says anything.
Pretty much. So that's all our questions for this week, and we are actually going to skip our strategy question for the week because we have already recorded for an hour and a half. So we will move straight on to Drew's rant of the week. Are you ready for this? Because I haven't even typed anything down. It's all up in my noggin. You ready for this?
Ad-lib all
My
day.
rant of the week is, we need to stop talking so much. We need to stop flapping our gums so much. Condense our thoughts a little bit. Try and get the show closer to an hour, because I'm sure people are sick of hearing us talk. And
they probably already left and probably watching the playoff game right now.
They probably are. Honestly, there's probably nobody watching us live. We're probably the only two not watching the playoff game right now.
We have two viewers right now.
Do we really?
Yes.
I wonder who's watching us. It's probably us. We're probably the viewers right now.
No, it was at one for most of the view here.
Well, that's awesome. Whoever's out there watching, thank you.
Oh, watching live anyways.
That's awesome.
They're still with us.
Well, I'm sorry you had to listen to us flap our gums for an hour and a half. We'll try and keep it closer to an hour next time, but we had 2 weeks of stuff worth to go through. Just be glad Scott wasn't here this week like he was supposed to, because then we would have had 10 more players to go through for buy and sell.
And this will probably be a 3-hour show.
Probably. So I'll go ahead and finish up that rant. Couple quick announcements. If you guys listen to the show on Blog Talk Radio, I'm so sorry, but we had to cut off our subscription with them. The cost of maintaining a server with them was prohibitively expensive. It was like $40 a month. I don't know if you know this. We make $0.00 off making the podcast and off of doing stuff on the subreddit. Like $0, big old zero. That money comes out of our pocket. Well, my pocket.
He's been great. Thanks, Drew.
Party. We've moved over to Podbean. That's an app you can get on, I know, Android. I believe you can get it on iPhones as well. You can access it from there. It's much cheaper to maintain our server there. I'm also working on getting us set up on iTunes. So within the next week, the Dynasty Playbook should be available on iTunes. So look for that if that's how you want to listen to the podcast. Other than that, that's all I have. Dave, do you have any parting shots?
Yes, I think I do actually talking about the tanking. I think I might actually open up a whole thread on the subreddit. That way more people could actually put their thing in. I could probably expand my thoughts more as well on text rather than voice. I think this is probably going to be a good topic to actually have its own separate topic on it.
Great, sounds good. In addition to that, the new startup mock draft thread was posted this morning, and I will be putting up the thread for the Dynasty Playbooks response thread here sometime today. Thank you all for listening. This has been the Dynasty Playbook, the first one of 2015. We look forward to doing 51 more this year. I have been Drew. You can find me on Reddit at EAF_Marine and on Twitter at DrewDotsonNFL. And with me, as always, is Dave. You can find Dave on Reddit at MTux96 and on Twitter at DynastyDaveII. Y'all have a good day.
Bye bye.